Good morning and welcome to our June 2017 customer webinar. Today, Christine Masters, our Director of Product Development, will show you how our newly updated article designer can help you better tell your stories. We've added tons of new options for aligning and presenting images in galleries, dragging and dropping related content into your stories, and changing your story presentations. Christine will show examples and give you a full demo of these exciting new features. We also have a special guest with us. Elizabeth Stevens is a news editor at the Columbia Missourian and an assistant professor with the University of Missouri School of Journalism. She'll talk about how her students are using BLOX CMS to tell long-form stories and give some examples of their work. In the room, we also have Brad Ward, our CEO, Patrick Malone, our Director of Software Development, Teresa Nelson, our Director of Business Development, and Cherry Wolf, a marketing specialist. I'm Aaron Gillette, Marketing Director at townnews.com. The presentation will take about 30 minutes with a Q&A to follow. At any point, you can type a question into the chat box, and we'll hold off on answering them until the end. We've got a jam-packed agenda, so I'm going to hand it off to Christine.
Awesome, thank you. So just to get started, as Aaron said, this is something that is already released, and this is available now, and it was released in the last version of our main software update. Just to give you a quick overview, working with some of our customers, a lot of customers are very interested in doing kind of more of these long-form presentations and in-depth reporting, and there was a lot of different ways people were doing this, and it was kind of difficult to, people were doing HTML assets, or some of the things they would do off-site on another, WordPress site or something like that, and we really just felt that it was something that we needed to make a lot easier for our newsrooms to do this kind of in-depth reporting. And so we're really excited about being able to offer this feature. Something that I have been asked by a couple of different sort of newsroom editors is, do we have any best practices for when to use long-form articles, or what the benefit is, or how to design them? So that's why I asked Elizabeth Stevens to give a real quick overview of kind of what she teaches in her classes for long-form journalism. As Aaron already mentioned, she's a news editor at Columbia Missourian, and she is the assistant professor teaching editing and web design at the University of Missouri. Just really quickly about the Columbia Missourian. They're a community newspaper that's affiliated with the University of Missouri, and they have a very kind of aggressively digital-first mobile program there and online digital program there. One of the things that they have is the interactive copy editing desk, where they really learn a lot of kind of digital storytelling and digital specialized editing type skills. So I thought Elizabeth would be a great person to talk about some of the things that they actually teach in their classes and that kind of thing. So Elizabeth, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of talk just a little bit about, if you could give us a quick overview of how you determine, like, what are some best practices for long-form design, and how you determine kind of when you're going to do long-form and what some of the advantages of it are. And then we're actually going to take a couple minutes after talking with Elizabeth to walk through a couple of her students' work, which I think will be fun. So yeah, so what do you think about that, Elizabeth?
Yeah, so we really start looking at long form when we're looking at a story like 1,500 words or more that has the visual and graphic elements that really support it and help tell the story. So we want to think about how the user is engaging with our content, and especially on mobile, when you get a story that's really long, it can just become overwhelming. So the long form really gives us an opportunity to intersperse those photos, videos, graphics, pull quotes, and subheads we also use. So that just kind of helps them stick with the story. We know that our users are often coming just directly to an article page from social or another link, and they don't come through the home page. So we feel like if we give them this positive experience, particularly on mobile, they're going to visit more of our site and continue to come back and click those links when they see them if we give them that strong experience as they're scrolling through a story.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too that, like you mentioned, especially on mobile, having that really mobile-friendly kind of scrolling, presentation where every couple of viewports they're seeing a new item, a new photo, a pull quote, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's great. So, so your students, as part of your classes, one of their, I guess their final assignment is to actually do a long-form article in BLOX?
Yeah. So we have students working in all different roles, both in our newsroom and in the journalism school in their classes. So we live on a semester schedule often. So we tend to get these bigger projects near the end of the semester. And so I have our copy editing students take those and really turn them into a long-form article. So they're editing all of the elements together. So they can, the photos, the videos, the graphics, the info boxes, in addition to the story. So they can envision how it would all flow together. And they work also with our photo editors to kind of make that happen and make sure we're utilizing those visuals well. So we see this, that they are often, once they go into jobs, they're doing these things too. And so if we can give them this experience and kind of talk through the opportunities that they have here and what this means for them going forward in their careers, that this is what places are doing more and more. We just see it pretty frequently. So whether they're on a design desk or in a digital producer role, we've seen that these are skills that they need once they get out into the real world.
And speaking of that, we kind of talked a little bit beforehand about this. If we have several hundred people on the line now, if there's anybody out there who actually has an open position, there are students graduating from the University of Missouri who have experience in BLOX and who know how to create these articles and have done this before. So if you have any open positions, feel free to email Elizabeth. I have her her email up here on the screen, and maybe you can hook up some people with a job. So that would be nice. But yeah, so and feel if you don't get a chance to write down her email, feel free to contact me and we can get everybody in touch. But yeah, so we had a couple of examples of some student work up here. Do you want to kind of very quickly walk us through some of these, Elizabeth?
Sure. So this one, this is an investigative piece that was more than 3,500 words. So we knew we needed to break up the story to keep that reader engaged in it. It wasn't a super visual story, but our photographer captured the scene, gave us some visual elements, and so we also used the subheads and info box to kind of break things up even more. This one I actually went back in after the new tools got released to utilize some of those tools. So being able to put an info box in is a new thing, and the full width photo is also great. I did look up the analytics on this, and we did find that users spent an average of 3 minutes and 40 seconds with the story, so we felt like that was really strong. And we had 71% of our readers were coming on a mobile device. So again, like that's why it's so important to us to emphasize that.
Is that an average digital or average rate for mobile for your site?
We're usually over 50%, I would say, on most stories. So
awesome. So this is another one of a story about pinball.
Yeah. So this story wasn't super long, but it did have great visuals that told the story well. Actually, that ball saved image comes right after a paragraph where it talks about the guy that saved pinball. So just the copy editor working through this and saw these photos and the story and was like, well, that's a perfect plug in there. So
yeah, you can see here that we've got some HTML, Vimeo things added. Again, pull quotes. These are all very mobile friendly. This is another one where, again, any photos and stuff that you don't have placed in line will create a gallery at the top.
Right. And this story, again, the photos just there were obvious places, especially with the subheads, to kind of introduce. I think that woman was kind of the main person for the story, so we gave her some good attention. We pulled in a sibling asset there. So there were just some obvious breaks and ways to add our visuals to help tell that story.
Awesome, that's great. Well, so I'm going to go into a little bit about how to develop these. Did you have any like last points to add before I kind of got into the nitty-gritty here?
No, you can go ahead.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. We really appreciate it, and we will. Elizabeth is one of several customers that I kind of consulted with throughout the designing of this feature, just to make sure that we really had a lot of the elements that we needed, that were really needed in Newsroom. So I appreciate everyone who helped me out with this. So just to go over this very quickly, a couple of notes ahead of time. These are they're fully functional on Flex templates. If you have Zen templates, please contact us and start the process of getting moved over so you can use all these really cool features. And I also want to note for those people who have kind of a total CMS workflow first, these tools still have to be deployed to total CMS, which will be probably in a month or a couple of months. But you could actually build stuff in on the BLOX side once it goes over to BLOX if you wanted to do that. But for those of you who are basically building or enhancing things on the hosted side, this is already available on the online hosted side. So first off, one of the main important things with the new article tools is that previously you could drag and drop child relationship items, so children of the article, but now you can also drag and drop siblings and parents in line, which you could not do previously. We also have added new alignment options. So once you have the item in line, you can double click on it and you can decide if you want it to be half width, and if it's half width, you can choose to have it float to the left or the right or centered. And then in addition, there's actually some new styles that you can designate on each of the inline items. By default, everything will have a default option, and that's essentially a backwards compatible setting that allows all of your essentially historical items to be the same as they were before, and it gives you a familiar default option going forward. But if you want to change things, that's a possibility. All of our asset types have two styles that are just built in. One is a headline link, which is a simple kind of just a link style in kind of a slightly different text, and they usually have like a little icon in front of them. And then we also have a summary card, which will show kind of like the summary block will show a little preview image and then like a headline and a small summary of that item. And that's available on all asset types. So for example, if you have a PDF of a government bill or something like that, you can put it as actually a picture of the PDF itself, or you can decide to make it just a link if you don't want to dedicate that much space to it, or you could make it a summary so it looks kind of like a related item with the preview of it and some information about it. In addition to those standard styles, the default one, headline, link, and summary, many of our different asset types have additional specialty styles that are available. For example, photos have a panorama mode and a zoom mode. Parallax photos, full bleed photos. Collections have a mosaic presentation, which is really cool. And table assets have a table presentation, obviously, so you can have a table inline. But again, or you could just have it as a link off to a table somewhere else. So all of those things now give you the capabilities of doing that. We don't usually do this, but I'm actually going to run through some of these examples live because I think that'll give you a really good example of kind of what this looks like. Let me find a good one here. There's a photo. So just as a quick example here, when you first come into the article, everything essentially looks the same. Now you'll see that you can again have child assets and sibling assets that can be drag and dropped in line. When you pull them over, this is standard, this is what you were seeing before, but now you can either right click on it to edit the display properties or just double click on it to bring up the display properties editing panel. And here's where you get the options to set the alignment. So again, default is whatever it was before, which, for example, for child articles, the default is to have a half-width right floated card presentation. So that's the default. For photos, the default is having a full-width centered photo. So when you have the default options there, it will do essentially what it did before. But you can also change that and have it left, center, or right. And then if you wanted to, again, change the width of it, you can choose to have it half width or full width. Now, it will be basically our interpretation of what half width is, whatever we think looks best in that viewport. So it might not be exactly mathematically half. Again, it depends on kind of that viewport. And I also want to mention that we did this essentially kind of a mobile first design on a lot of this. So everything looks best we made sure that it looked best on mobile. So some of these options, if there's, for example, a half-width YouTube video, for the smallest viewports, we just made that full width because half-width videos are very, very tiny when it's on a phone. So there are images, for example, images do keep their half-width on a phone because in that case, a lot of times a vertical photo, when it's 100% even on a phone, it ends up being very large. So we kind of just used our best judgment as to how to interpret these signals when we go into mobile mode. So then for presentation, we have different style options that are available on different types of assets. So again, photos get a asset presentation display. That means that it will revert to whatever its asset presentation mode is on the photo itself. So if you had a mugshot, it's going to show you a mugshot mode. If you have a panorama, it's going to show you a panorama when you're in line, for example. Or it has a couple of additional options, such as parallax and full bleed. And that was kind of one of the examples that we looked at over here, where this is actually a full bleed article that goes all the way out side to side. And these are pretty big on desktop, and a lot of people like these even if they're so huge on desktop, and they also look really great on mobile. That's kind of in my personal opinion, a great way to start an article by having that giant full page photo up there. And then I will also mention that as part of this change, and we rolled this out about a month ago, we actually are now having long form articles themselves are a little bit pulled in from the sides. So it's got kind of a skinnier column down there, just so that we have the things that are full width or full bleed really are impactual in that long form presentation. And I also want to mention too that for the parallax option and the full bleed option, those require that there is no rail on the page. And now most of the time if you're in a long form mode, you don't have a right rail in long form. So I would say that usually if you're using long form, that would be the preferred mechanism for parallax and full bleed, just because obviously you can't really go behind the column or whatever if it's full bleed. Other than that, all of these presentation modes will work in some way in just standard articles, personality presentation, or long form presentation articles. My favorite is just what these things look like in long form, so I'm a little biased towards that, but these can definitely be used in all kinds of articles. Another thing that I kind of wanted to mention quickly here is just the idea that when you're in the asset editor here, one thing you could do is actually search by presentation : long_form. And that's a really good way to just search for anything in a particular presentation mode. For those of you who are in our content exchange program, it is really awesome to just go into the content exchange channel and search for all of the items they have in presentation mode, and you're able to see what work people did on long form articles and pull those into your site. It's really awesome. In terms of syndication, there's a couple of key points to talk about. Firstly, if you have a sibling asset that is pulled in line, Sibling assets, obviously they did not syndicate before. They don't come over with the article. And children do when you're syndicating something. But now that we are adding the inline siblings, the sibling asset itself still will not syndicate as part of the syndication process. But what we do is we transform that inline sibling placement to just a link on the resulting story once it's syndicated to another site. So what this ends up doing, it's a really interesting kind of cross-promotional traffic program where when you're syndicating something to Content Exchange, what I would do is I would add in a couple of extra sibling links to, semi-related content, other things that this type of user reading that story would be interested in. And when that's syndicated out to our over 400 different sites that are participating in the Content Exchange program, those links on your stories actually become links back to your site. So not only do they get to have the article and they get page views and you get canonical links back to your site, canonical SEO juice back to your site, but now you have additional links with specific keywords in them linking back to your actual original site. So I think that's a kind of a great addition to this program. I also want to mention that when you're syndicating content to any kind of hub or the Content Exchange, the placements and the style options of your kind of designed article do come across. So this means that if you spend extra time doing a great job, pulling together a really nice article, having some additional text, etc., that benefits everybody and they get that awesome, well-designed site coming over to them as well. I'll show you just one quick example. This is actually, I found this on our Content Exchange. I think this came out last week. But this is a great article that Lancaster put together and just did a really great job with that. You can see they've got inline ads, a really big photo across the top here, pull quotes. This is what a collection mosaic looks like. So they have several different collections on here with different styles. So this is a really great presentation of photos. Again, inline sibling assets that link off to other sites, inline graphics, side-to-side photos. Again, more options for people to have other related content while they're inline. And then this is something obviously that is an option before, but adding those subheads, like Elizabeth said, is a great way to break up the text and to let the user know that they're kind of at a new section. If you don't have any text available or any additional photos available, adding a pull quote really helps kind of have visual interest as users go down the page. So again, they have I guess this is a YouTube video inline that you can play the YouTube video. And again, notice how the long form content is pulled in a little bit from the sides here, and how the actual inline items kind of jut out to the side just to create visual interest. Again, another mosaic. And then at the bottom here, they actually had a bunch of extra images of, I guess these are nuclear power plants, I think, I assume. So they added some extra photos here to the bottom in just a really nice little a little slideshow that can, again, be an inline slideshow, which is just a great option. One thing I did just out of interest is I looked at the statistics of this particular article as compared to other just general articles throughout our site. And one thing, so I'll just tell you this very quickly. Now, this particular story is behind subscription. So I'm very lucky as an employee at Town News that I get free subscription as part, so I was able to log in, but that's part of their insider program. So this is a subscription article, but looking at regular BLOX articles, our standard, statistics are about maybe a little bit more than 2 page views per session, about a 1.5 to 2 minute average user session, and about a 60 to 70% bounce rate. So that's like standard across Town News. On Lancaster site specifically, just for their article content, they have about a 2.5 page views per user. They have about a 2.5 minute session and about a 60% bounce rate, so that's a little bit better than average. Now for this particular article, they had about a 4.8 per page views per user. So people who were reading this article were much more likely to go to another article and read more as they were on this page. So again, having those sibling articles link back and forth to relevant content is really helpful. On this particular article, again, their standard article is about 2.5 minutes. This particular article was over 6 minutes. So this article, again, because of the long format, because of the visual interest throughout the page, all of the additional photos and videos, had a 6-minute average user session and only a 30% bounce rate. So again, even just compared to other things on the Lancaster site, this particular story, because of the length, because of the great journalism, because of all the visual interest, really helped keep people on the page and really helped them find additional content as they were looking through the page. So I think that's a great example as well. A couple other quick tips and tricks. One thing that I think is just something that you can experiment with, I created as just a kind of fun example, a new section called long form, and then I created a couple of different subsections. One I called dark and one I called fun. So for different types of articles, I could categorize it into that section to get the properties that I set on that section that would inherit down to those articles. So just as an example, on this dark section that I created here, I actually went in and set my background color. I set the content to also black so that I have a full black background, and then just kind of some darker body text color. And then I created this long form article here, and thanks to, I think this is nwi.com for letting me just use this as an example. But yeah, so I kind of stole all their content and kind of put it into this on my dev site just as an example. But again, really dark background color. This is using a hammer headline here and a long form article. This is the full bleed photo, which is again just really dramatic with that kind of top headline treatment there. As you go down the page, we've got some ads in the center, obviously, pull quotes, side to side images, full width images. Again, another one of those nice collections that break things up. You can do also, as a side note, with these collections, if you only had 2 photos or 3 photos, it would do essentially just the 2-photo mosaic presentation, just like the block does. This is an example of a fact box. So this is a half-width left fact box. This is a full-width fact box. So you can see how these are, again, great ways to kind of break up the text as needed. Again, pull quotes, just really adding a lot of visual interest. Another thing that I did that's kind of a fun example is on one of my sections, again, I called it just the fun section. I did some additional styling just to target some of the headline styles in that section so that I had kind of a fun headline font that's available. So again, full width, side to side. Here's a parallax photo. So again, this is really fun on mobile as you're scrolling down the page. It causes a lot of visual interest. Full width, side to side. And again, these are really mobile friendly. This is an example where I used a masthead placement for like a kind of a headline masthead treatment. So yeah, again, I think that this is just a lot of fun, and hopefully you're able to, it won't solve necessarily every single thing that you've ever wanted to do within a context of an article page, but we really think that it will help and add a lot of additional visual interest. And like I said, what we've seen from the statistics so far is it really can help improve page views per user and section length as those users get kind of compelled deeper into the story. So a couple other quick things here. This is not the last thing that we're doing with the with kind of article design. We have another feature coming out in the next couple of months here that we're calling cover art. And essentially it's kind of like a teaser image where you can upload an additional photo to your article. And it's not actually not an asset, so it can be kind of very artistic or like a blurry background or a zoom in stock photo or something like that, just to, again, create like a cover art image. And what it does is it shows full height of the initial viewport. So regardless of the type of viewport you're on, it'll create a full, so this is something that would be in like desktop. So again, the full width of desktop. And then this is an example of mobile where again, it creates just the top page on mobile. And then as you scroll up, you scroll into the next part of the story. So we think it's just a great way to kind of introduce a new story and get them, just like you're reading a book or something where the front page is just like magazine style presentation. There's also going to be options on how to place the headline text elements on top of it. So in this case, we have centered and at the bottom, and we'll probably do something with it. There's like, there'll be top and then left and right, so you can kind of put it in the different corners depending on what that photo looks like. So we're really excited about that also, and we hope to see that in the next couple of months. A couple other really quick things that just came out in our latest big software update that I wanted to mention. We now have batch upload available in several more places throughout the admin. The last couple of times I introduced this to some customers, we had applause. So I assume everyone's applauding in their homes and desks now. We just can't hear it. But yeah, we've got really great feedback on this so far. It's now available in a collection asset where you go to children and then add. You can now batch upload directly into the collection. So you don't have to batch upload into just the general editing panel. Sometimes people would keyword all of them, then wait till they go in and then search for them and then add them. So this hopefully will save a lot of steps. And it's also available in the related panel where you're adding related items. So again, if you're starting that new long form article that has a bunch of photos, start the article, upload the photos directly into it. You don't have to create them separately and then add them in.
You are getting virtual applause here on that feature.
Great.
Someone just
Okay,
said
good.
yes, and someone said applause. So
Great.
yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you for,
Yes.
I assumed,
Yes.
but it's good to know for sure. A couple other things that, it's from the town news perspective, we're always working really, really hard to speed things up on our websites, and sometimes it's difficult because, with ads and different types of third-party content that people put on their site, all those types of things, it's very difficult for us to make changes big enough that will really impact sites. But that being said, I think that some of these recent things, we're seeing a noticeable change. We're actually in the next couple of months going to put together some numbers and maybe do maybe a blog post or a presentation about this when we see some of the numbers coming back. But we've done a bunch of additional work on prefetching and preloading content as available. These are some new features that are available in browsers. Having secure CDN connections, which means that we can move all things on CDN over to HTTP2. This actually launched on the day before yesterday, I think. And we think that this will make a pretty good percentage increase in terms of speed. It might not be super noticeable of people who are, going to the site on a day-to-day basis, but we do think that it will make a good percentage improvement. This basically means that for all of our standard library files and images, instead of downloading just a couple at a time and then blocking on the rest of them and then a couple more, this will do multiplexing, so it essentially downloads them all at the same time. So we really do think that there's going to be some pretty good speed increases there.
Well, right now we have an incredible number
Okay.
of questions. So
Yeah,
we've got the questions are flowing in. So if you're ready, we'll start working through those.
Let's do it.
We had 6 or 7 people ask if you can demonstrate doing a pull quote and pulling that into an article.
Yeah, that's a great example here. Let me get my, yeah, having the pull quotes inline is a really nice feature because, I don't know what article this is, okay. It's a really nice feature because it's something that is very easy to add, and it, again, has a lot of visual interest in it. So I'll just give a really super quick overview of, in BLOX, you can go into the application settings and go into related content styles. And there's a bunch of different styles that will come over by default. One of them is a pull quote, but there's a whole bunch of other ones, fact boxes, did you know, etc. And these all have kind of slightly different placements or slightly different styles. If you wanted to create a new one, you could come in here and say, you know, if there's a, if you go, or one of those types of specialty info boxes that you might be doing in print or something you want to do especially for just online, you can choose the type of content box it is, and then you can just choose a default title. And then that will make it available to your newsroom in the related content area. So you go to related, and then you go to content, and this is where you can create new related content items. So again, these items are essentially all of the different styles that you have set up over here. So if you wanted to create a new special thing for your newsroom, you could, or you could just use the default ones that we offer. Pull quote is one of those. So one thing that's kind of special about pull quote is that we had a little bit of a, I don't want to say struggle, a indecisiveness possibly. I guess we're kind of trying to figure out back and forth exactly how we wanted this to work, but I think we came up with finally a good compromise on this. So essentially, you can type in a title up here, but the title by default does not show up. If you are in a newsroom environment where you do want the titles to show up, we can actually make a minor code change to your site and you can have the titles show up. But by default, those do not show up. So you can say, this is just my quote from Christine. And then in here, you can type whatever your quote is going to be. And then underneath that, you can say who the person is from. Now, this does give you some styling options. So a lot of times what I like to do is make that like bold and italicized. And then you can make this actually align right. And then this will be just a nice pull quote that you can add. And then essentially all you do is drag it in line, just like you can with any other kind of asset type. And again, when you click on those, you have the option to say left, and then you can say you want it to be half width. And then that'll give you that nice little left floated half size pull quote option. Again, on mobile, it does go full width because they looked pretty crazy trying to do half width on mobile. But it's a really great way to add some visual interest throughout the article. And a couple of quick other things to note, it does give you a little indication here of what the styles are set for this particular thing. So you can kind of look through that and see when you're looking at a page, you know, how somebody set this up. And I would also recommend to make sure that when you can preview these and see what your changes look like when you add things in line. Note that depending on the size, so you might want to preview it in different sizes so you can see what the ads look like. You might have a situation where you've got a floated article or a floated image right up next to an ad, and in some viewports it might look weird, so you might want to just move it up a little bit and move it down a little bit depending on how that looks like. So there might be a little bit of checking that you have to do when you do these sorts of things.
Okay. There was a mention in the release of using long form as a keyword to target ads. Can you provide more detail on that?
Yes. So essentially, one of the things that we did in here, I can show this as an example. If you actually look at the page source, in the keywords, you'll see this new keyword called full-long form. And what this allows you to do is, in DFP or in Ad Manager, you can actually target ads to the keyword of full-long form, and those ads will essentially overwrite your default in-story ads. I think that this is a really great opportunity, especially if you're just going to start doing more kind of long form content, this is a good opportunity to have, maybe larger format, billboard style ads or larger format ads. And then it could be an additional revenue source. Some people are concerned with doing long form articles that the right rail goes away, and a lot of times people have a lot of ads in those right rails. So this is a way that you can essentially make up that revenue loss by having specialty ads in those sections. Also remember, you can put utility regions on pages, you can add things within the utility regions inline that will show up on all kinds of articles. But this is a way to specifically target full width long form articles, and I think that could be something that we're going to come out with some additional best practices around this, because I want to give some better examples of exactly how to set this up. But if you are somebody who knows how to target things in DFP to the keywords, feel free to give this a try and let me know if you're able to get it set up so we can provide some examples of that.
Someone's wondering if the Missourian staff are working in TCMS and BLOX Total CMS or directly in BLOX CMS hosted.
I don't know, is Elizabeth still?
I'll unmute her.
Elizabeth, are you still there?
I am. So that's a complicated answer. We do use TCMS, but we do it reverse. So because we are web first and the number of people in our newsroom, we just decided to reverse the workflow. So we do we start all our content in BLOX CMS and syndicate over to TCMS for our print edition.
Awesome.
Feel free to email me if you have further questions.
Yeah.
Complicated.
No, thank you. That's actually a good, we actually have a couple of different, especially the very aggressively digital first customers who are trying to post things online first and they push back to Total CMS. I will say that one of the things that we are working on, there's probably going to be maybe 2 or 3 releases. We're doing this as a staged release, but we're working on kind of a fast syndication between Total CMS and BLOX, so that regardless of if you start with Total CMS first or you start with hosted, you can see really fast syndication between the two, and it will make that less of an issue as to where you're going to start. It'll be basically a couple of seconds from one to the other, no matter where you start. So there's several things that we're doing to kind of really support that type of workflow and essentially make it more something where you can kind of choose whatever type of workflow you want.
Are these features only available in long form mode?
No, like I was saying, these are available in any type of article, in personality mode or in long form. It's just that for parallax and for full bleed, those have to be on a situation with no right rail, so which is usually long form.
Someone asked if we can email the example links that were used in this presentation. When we put together the slideshow to distribute to everybody, sure. Yeah, we can make sure to pull out all those example links so they're easy for everyone to get to. If you put a photo with left alignment directly under one with right alignment, will they pair up on the same line and stretch across the story?
No. If you want to do that sort of thing, you probably could create a collection of just 2 images and they'll end up with kind of a side-by-side mosaic. But they are kind of, if you put them one float this way and one float that way, they kind of end up being slightly staggered. So they're not exactly what you're, we thought about that. We tried to see if we could do that, but it wasn't perfect, so.
Many of these inline styles only apply to editorial assets. We've tried using related business, marketplace, and classified assets and don't seem to have good results. Will you be working on styling for business, calendar, and classified inline assets?
Those should work. So you might want to put in a support ticket if you haven't already. It might be that there's some customizations or maybe something on your site needs to be updated. But we actually did that, and that's a good point. You can add a calendar item. You can add a classified item. If you have, so imagine being able to do a story about pets and then have inline, laboratory retrievers from your actual classified section inline would be really cool. But yeah, same thing with businesses. If you have a related business, you could just put like a link to the business and it shows their little logo and address and stuff underneath. So those should be supported. So if you're having any issues, just feel free to email us.
Can you change the defaults for a site? I believe he was referring to presentation modes when they're inline.
Right. Yeah, we would have to add that as a new feature request. There's been some discussion about that, but as of right now, that's not possible. We can look at adding that though.
Can you show an example of parallax?
Yeah, that was I think on here. So here's what the parallax looks like. Essentially, parallax means that it takes whatever photo you have and it makes it the entire page. But then you have just a window that looks through to the photo that's the size of the entire page, if that makes sense. So you can see that the photo goes all the way up here to the top and all the way down here to the bottom, but you're just looking at a window as it scrolls across. So it's a pretty cool technique.
Do articles in this format still have the in-article ad position?
Yes, they do.
Where do the ad positions get moved to when switching to long form, since it removes the rail?
Depending on how you have your site set up, it will either just put the ads towards the bottom, or it will insert them into, it's called the smart ad setting. If you have the smart ad setting, it actually takes the rail ads and puts them inside of the article instead of the article ads. So a lot of people will do that sort of thing if they're, if you're just doing maybe programmatic ads inside of the article and then the local ads in the rail, that way the local ads can take precedence when it goes over into like a mobile format or a full single column format.
Okay. Can you do a batch edit on article assets to change their presentation?
You can, outside of, you just select them essentially and then do the batch edit on them, and presentation mode is an option.
Is there a new look/design for the pull quotes?
About a month or a month and a half ago, we did a template release to update some of our related content styles. In preparation for this, and by the way, this has taken several template updates and software updates. So there's been we've been kind of behind the scenes working on this for a couple months now. So a couple of months ago, we actually did a template update where we changed the related content styles. And the reason why we did that is so that they had a better presentation, because we were going to do a release to pull them in line. So we did change them slightly, but it happened a couple months ago.
Okay. What's your recommendation for working from BLOX TCMS to BLOX CMS with an asset? Every time the TCMS asset is resaved, it will strip the changes made in BLOX.
I would send us a support ticket about that. One of the things that we did as part of this is we built in knowledge of the inline assets into the Total CMS workflow, so that when things are written back into hosted from Total CMS or that actually have knowledge of them and they translate in and out. So my understanding is that should be working. We might need to investigate that particular circumstance.
Okay. Can you show us how to make the mosaic photo collage?
Sure. Essentially, all that does is it's a collection asset. So you just need to get a collection asset from somewhere in your site. So in this case, you might actually be creating a collection specific to your article. And like I said, you can have multiple, 30 photos in a collection, or you can just have a couple if you wanted to do kind of a special presentation. And then you drag that in line. And then for the collections have their own special presentation mode that are just for collections. And again, you can have the asset presentation. So when you're in the collection itself, they have presentation modes on the asset, which can be like a paging gallery, for example. That's how Lancaster Online did that slideshow inside the article. Or you have a special presentation mode here of mosaic, and then that will create the inline mosaic mode.
Cool. If you map a location in an article, how does that show up in long form?
I believe, I'm not sure at the top of my head, I think it shows up at the bottom of the article. I have to check on that, but it does show up in there. I'm not sure where exactly inside the long form it shows up. I think it's at the bottom.
Okay.
But we don't have the capability of doing maps inline right now, so, which is kind of a cool idea. I'm not sure about that one.
Okay. Can you break up text by adding or changing the background color of certain paragraphs?
Not right now that I can think of an easy way, other than inline HTML. I will say one other really quick thing about this is that one really nice thing about the way that we did this is that all of these references and style options and headlines and all of this stuff are not directly embedded HTML inside of the article. So if you change things in the future, or you, when we do some future, minority report matrix CMS, and you move all your stuff over to the new CMS, all of these options are not specifically tied to specific HTML, so they're easily transferable into a future mode, if that makes sense.
Someone is having a problem with the parallax photo option. It displays from the left side of the page to halfway through the main column only, even on long form. Is that something you're aware of?
Yeah, I would put in a support ticket. Yeah.
How do you make an article long form?
So all it is at the bottom of the page here, there's a presentation. And you just choose long form mode.
How do you pull the content boxes, fact boxes, etc. into the article? It's exactly the same as the pull quote you demonstrated earlier, correct?
Yep, they just drag and drop. And then once they're in line, you can drag and drop them from here as well. So just keep moving stuff around. It only does it between paragraphs, so if you try to put it inside of a paragraph, it's going to go wherever it feels is closest to that.
What's the difference between parallax and full bleed?
So that's a good question. Full bleed is essentially just a big photo that goes all the way side to side. So there's no whatever the viewport is, it'll go all the way as far as it can out to the side. Whereas parallax, it also goes out to the side, but it's got that window kind of scrolling effect. But they both go all the way out to the side of the rails. They're just a slightly different, scrolling behavior.
Okay. Can you show us more about choosing different fonts?
Sure. I will just very quickly show this, and if we want to, again, you can kind of create a support ticket, and if you need to have some more details on this, but all I did was create essentially a custom style. I have template access, obviously, and you can just create kind of some inline styles here. So in this particular case, we're just adding in font family. I don't remember if this is the one that I was showing or not, but and you can add that to a particular section. You'll also have to have somewhere where it's going to load the fonts. So I was using the Google Font CDN, and then you just create, in this case I did, if the URL contains fun, so like the section is going to be fun, then you load this thing. So if you're interested in that, feel free to submit a ticket or email me, and I can kind of give you some steps on that. And again, one nice thing about this is that you should consider pretty much all of this stuff to be just gravy added to the story. They shouldn't, your story itself shouldn't depend on these features. So if in the future you get rid of this CSS file, or you change this up, that your story doesn't depend on it, it just reverts to a standard long form article. So that way, this is just a kind of progressive design, right, where it's just adding stuff as needed, or as capable, I guess.
When we do neat digital designs like this, the design/multimedia elements get entirely stripped out when it goes through InDesign and it's laid out on the page for the paper. Is there a workaround for this?
Well, I would say, send us a support ticket on that, and we can give you more information on. I mean, obviously, a lot of the online design stuff would not necessarily be relevant for
Right.
print.
Wouldn't necessarily apply.
Right, so we would want to hear from you what you're looking to do. The information does get sent over to Total CMS, so it's possible if there's a feature request there that, you know, we want certain things to happen, we can look at that. So yeah, send us in a ticket and we can, you know, discuss what specifically you're looking to do there.
Okay, someone wondering if we can post the direct link to the doc for these features. We can also include that in the email that we send out.
Yeah, I actually forgot to talk about that, but I did bring this up just to show everybody. If you search for, I think that I searched for designer in the help center, we do have some more information, kind of an FAQ about the tools and what they are, and we have a couple of examples of what they look like, so you can view this documentation if you're having any issues. I will also mention very quickly that we are continuing to iterate on this as people, you know, we're making some tweaks in terms of what fonts look like in certain styles, and there's several things that we're still tweaking as relates to this. So if something does seem kind of funny to you, or you think that something could be improved, please submit us a ticket and we can look at that. We're still iterating on this.
Is there a way to use both full bleed and parallax presentation options on the same photo? That's sort of automatic, right? If you do parallax, it is full bleed.
Great.
So
Parallax is always full bleed.
someone said these features are great. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
Can we flag content we think should be picked up by the townnews.com content exchange?
That's a good question. What I would do is, I would submit a ticket to our support team for more information on that. Essentially the way that the content exchange works is it pulls specific sections from your site. So I would want to kind of look at what your site is and how it's set up. It's also possible that we can set up a special flag to trigger content exchange. So if there's something that you specifically wanted to, you know, make sure headed in that direction, that's something that we could look into as well.
Can we filter out content? Can we filter our content out of the content exchange when perusing its content?
Yes, I would also submit a ticket about that, and we can give you information about your particular site. But there are DRM rules that are set up, and depending on how your site is set up, you can choose how those DRM rules are triggered. Depending again on section or flag, you can say that I want this to be embargoed, or I want, you know, so you could hold it for a week to make sure that you have it out first, or you could say just this section or this flag do not syndicate as well.
Is this all done through BLOX CMS, or can we do it through BLOX Total CMS?
You will be able to do it in Total CMS when it's available. It'll probably take, usually the Total CMS is delayed by about a month and a half to 2 months, just for kind of stability reasons. So all of these features will be available in Total CMS in a couple of months.
Will we be able to download the slideshow after the presentation? Yeah, we will send out the slideshow along with the links that we've talked about, along with the video. It'll take us a little while to get the video processed, but within the next couple days we should be able to send out an email to everybody with all of that information. Are there any issues with the inline features, such as when publishers send content by RSS to mobile apps?
Okay, that's a good question. What we did, there's a lot of places where, you know, our content management system is very friendly with other platforms. So we have AMP articles, we have RSS feeds, we have Facebook Instant articles, we've got feeds out to apps. And we did go through and look at all of those different options and made sure that nothing, so right now our kind of standard was that nothing should break horribly. So that was the first phase. So on most things where, you know, specialty apps or things like that have, you know, we didn't want to include the HTML for fear that it could break something or upset some kind of flow. So in most of those cases, we filtered it out. We are going to be revisiting some of those things. AMP is a good example where we're already looking at AMP to add additional support for some of these inline items. Several of them do work, but there were some that were potentially problematic with how AMP works. So we are going to revisit those and see if we can add additional functionality there. But in general, we kind of stripped it back to where it was previously, and then we're going to be adding things on as possible. But these might not be available in all of those formats just because that format doesn't accept or like inline HTML.
Okay. Are there any plans to allow the user to specify the width of the inline asset or pick percentages for the width as opposed to just picking full or half?
We can talk about that. I was, for this first version, we tried to kind of keep it simple. One thing that I would say, kind of as I was talking about before, is that half isn't really half. It's just like, I think it's actually 35% in most cases. So that would be something that I would be concerned about. That being said, we can talk about that. We can also see if maybe if everybody wants a 1/3 option or a 75% option, maybe if there's a specific thing that everyone's wanting, that might be something. We can add additional styles into those options as well. So yeah, feel free to submit a ticket for that, and we can, what your use cases are, and we can discuss that.
Okay. Can we do live polls in long form stories?
You can do a poll in a long form story, and those also have style options on them. So one kind of example that I was testing was if you had, let's say, 4 different polls, you can kind of have them left float, right float as it goes down the page. Again, in mobile, it'll be full width. Or you can choose to have a link off to the form, and you can just make it a headline link. It doesn't have to be the inline poll itself. So there's a lot of different options you can do. So it could be a live poll, or it could be just a link or a summary asset of a poll also.
Okay. Is it possible to adjust the margin widths so the blank space on the sides is not quite as wide?
You can with CSS. That's basically just a big margin in CSS, so that's something that you could override with CSS.
With the batch editing updates, will we be able to batch edit titles of photos?
That is going to be in a future, that's a future feature. We have that on our roadmap where, there's essentially all at once editing capabilities, but that is not available at this time.
Is putting in a breakout box roughly the same as a pull quote?
Correct. Yeah, breakout boxes I would call kind of the same thing as like an info box. And so again, on the print side, you put breakout boxes to have additional information at certain points, and that's very similar to that's the same concept of having pull quotes or info boxes throughout the story for visual interest.
Okay.
Or information.
Do inline assets work/present correctly in combination with the page break feature?
Yes, they should. Yeah, that was something that we tested. Obviously, it'll show wherever it is within that page itself. So if you're having any problems with that, let us know. But that should work correctly.
Okay. How can we make the background dark or fun as demonstrated earlier?
Sure. So that's essentially just a URL. I created a special URL for that, and then I just changed some of the settings on that particular URL in the block editor. And again, you have a background color, and then there's a content background color, which is essentially just inside of the content itself. There's a background. So usually those need to look the same. Otherwise, it looks kind of weird with the photos breaking out behind it sometimes. But you can play with that and see what you think. So again, just create a new section, and on that particular section, you can play around with changing some of these style options, and then you can preview what your story looks like. Make sure that this is the first section applied to your story so that it gets those styles. You can try, I also kind of played around with some of the body texture items and things like that. So there's a lot of things that you can do here. Turning off the share icons or changing their styles. There's a bunch of different style options that you can do here, but just for that particular section, and then just assign that story to the specialty long form design section, and then you'll get that as your kind of setup for that article. And obviously you can choose, you could have hundreds of long-form dark articles as you keep putting them out. You can reuse the same styles over and over again.
Very cool. What is the best way to add related content, i.e. the previous piece on the Watchdog story? What's the best way to add related content?
So it's probably a good thing to talk just generally that you should be aware essentially of our philosophy on how to use these different asset types. I consider it to definitely be a best practice to kind of follow our philosophy for how these things are created, just so that you don't get in trouble about things later, So just as an example, things that are children, so you have a child asset, are specifically related to this article. So those are things that you wouldn't want the article to exist without, right? And they don't really stand on their own. They're specifically owned by this asset, just like you own your children, right, Erin? Yeah.
That's what I tell them.
Yeah. No, but they're very closely connected. Sibling assets are sort of related. They can stand on their own. They're of interest to people who are reading this, but they're not necessarily, obviously they can travel and syndicate without those things attached to them. So if you kind of stay within that paradigm of children specifically being attached to the parent, and then siblings being kind of editorial recommendations. They don't have to be related specifically, they're just sort of related. Those types of things, again, if you keep that kind of standard, you'll, I think, have good success with that. But
someone just said they look at siblings as more like cousins.
Sure, yeah. We should put
they're talking about
cousin
software.
assets, there you go. Right. Yeah, but again, consider them to be like, we have behavioral recommendations, we have contextual recommendations. These are editorial recommendations. This is the editorial staff, the reporter, making recommendations as to what people reading this article would like. And then you can kind of just attach those. I actually like doing them. You might have one in the middle of the article and then one 75% down, and then you could do 2 or 3 towards the bottom. And it's just a really great way to add, like I said, editorial recommendations.
Let's see. When I tried to put a photo across the top above the whole story full bleed, it still shows the whole collection of photos above it.
We'd have to look at what that situation is. You might want to play around with the masthead presentation mode of an article, of a photo. The masthead and showcase presentation of photos still show up on these, and they'll show up kind of above the title or above the article area.
And it's probably important too to mention, this all requires
Flex templates.
System templates.
Correct. No, it'll work on standard templates. Flex templates. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just Zen that has not full support for it.
As you said, well, and if you're not on a system template, you have to be on automatic updates or updates.
Yeah, you should have updates on, exactly. Yes, you do need to have updates on these. But like I said, a lot of these changes went out actually a couple months ago in terms of the template changes. So, but yeah, so for those people who do have something weird going on, that's one of those things you might not have updates. So just submit us a ticket and we can look at your particular site.
After you've dragged a pull quote into the article, how do you delete it if you've made a mistake?
So on anything that is inline, essentially if you drag it inline, you can kind of still highlight it and delete it, or you can right click and click remove. So either one of those is possible, but you can just kind of highlight it and delete it, or right click.
Can you tweak the headline and byline size and fonts and the header font?
You can with CSS. I would also say, experiment with, on the other tab, we do have some optional different types of different types of headline presentations. So we have the hammer headline, which is that big all caps headline. That will actually automatically size to the kind of appropriate size based on how many characters are in it. And then we have a kicker and subhead. So you can kind of experiment between all of those and see if any of those look good for you. But otherwise, if you're looking for a more global change, that's something that you can do with minor CSS updates.
How do you know if you have CSS?
Everybody has CSS
Everybody has
for
it.
free.
Yep.
Yeah,
And we can help you, we can assist you with making changes
Yes.
to CSS if you're not familiar.
Right, they probably mean if they have access to actually make changes to those. I would talk to, kind of whoever's the main contact at your organization, and if you have CSS skills and you know how to do it, you can ask them for permission, and we can see about getting you, access to that. But it kind of depends on your organization's workflow and what their desires are for doing that. If you do want something, that's also something that we can make changes as well. So if there is something that you want to have changed, but you don't have necessarily people on staff who are able to do that, just let us know and we can help you with that for sure.
When switching an existing story to long form, how do you take the original picture slide off so a full bleed photo is at the top under the headline?
Can you say it over time? When switching to long form?
When switching an existing story to long form, how do you take the original picture slide off so a full bleed photo is at the top under the headline?
So essentially, any photos that are not in line will become a gallery at the top of the page, right? So if you want your top of the page full width inline image to be truly at the top, you just have to make sure that everything else is inline somewhere. Otherwise, you'll get the gallery.
Okay.
Hope that makes sense. Just try to put everything in line. So when you're first starting out, put everything in line. That'll be a little bit easier. And then as you get a little bit more advanced, you'll kind of start to figure out that, actually, I want to have a gallery here. Actually, I want to have a showcase image here. And then you'll be able to kind of figure out how to leave those out.
And they responded that yes, that worked, so thank you.
Awesome, great.
Okay, it looks like we've worked through the questions here.
That was one question per person, I believe.
Not even close. Someone just said thank you for all this. We love the new features.
Yeah, we've gotten really great feedback on this, and we really appreciate, like I said, I really appreciate the people who have helped me kind of put all these things together, and I had a lot of help from people testing this out and giving ideas, and so we really appreciate that. And if you're interested in, like I said, the community, well, I guess that's what you can talk about now, but the community board is a great place. We had a lot of discussions on how kind of we want this to set up, and definitely let us know, submit tickets if you have feature requests or ideas about this stuff. We'd love to continue to add more good features to this.
One real quick question that just came in. Can we use HTML/CSS coding within an individual article asset that only affects that specific article?
So there's two ways to do that. One is each different article has a class with its unique identifier. So if you just add some CSS to that unique identifier, that would work. Actually, that would probably be my preferred method. And again, you should expect that one day that will be lost. So it should be just like fun extra stuff, not any thing that's really, but changing fonts and things like that you could do.
I can imagine that getting really hairy.
Right,
fast
exactly, and then you might want to just after a year you delete all of the old stuff or something like that. There's a really good article online if you search for it. The Atlantic is doing custom articles, and they have a very similar feature, and they've got a great kind of philosophy behind how that way they just keep the semantic text separate from the styles, and that's the same concept here.
Okay, well, thank you, Christine. I'm sure you need to give your voice a rest. That
Yeah.
was quite a few questions, so great job. And thank you to Elizabeth Stevens for participating in
thanks,
this.
Elizabeth.
That was extremely helpful.
Hopefully we get credit at the University of Missouri now for our class. No? Just kidding.
CD credit.
An honorable degree? No.
So honorary, yeah. So as mentioned, we will send an email out with a link to the video, a link to download the presentation, all of the links and stuff like that. We will send that out within the next couple of days. You can reach all of the documentation we've talked about here at help.blockcms.com. Any support calls, call 800-293-9576 or visit us at support.townnews.com. Our partner community is a great place to share ideas, and there are some discussions about the new features going on over at the partner community right now. Go check that out at community.townnews.com. You can sign up to receive status notifications for all of our systems and software at townnews.status.io. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. We send out a variety of emails in any given month, and you can sign up for all of those by visiting townnews.com, clicking news, and then you'll see a sidebar that has all of our available newsletters and emails and stuff like that, and you can sign up right on that page. Anyway, thank you very much. We will, we'll talk to you guys again in July. We really appreciate everyone turning out, and hope you enjoy all of these new features. Thanks a lot, Christine, and thanks again, Elizabeth.
Thank you.